Obviously, we talk a lot about games on this channel, yet we rarely discuss the machines responsible for processing and rendering these awesome game world experiences. Computers. Gnoggin. Now when I say computers, I don't just mean high-end gaming PCs. I'm also talking about consoles, which are really just budget PCs intended to leverage gaming-specific operating systems. So regardless of how you play your games, what you're seeing on screen is coming from an incredibly complex set of circuits, known as a graphical processing unit, which works hand in hand with the central processing unit. These two chips, along with the rest of the computer, work to produce the stunning visuals of all the games we love. Both of these units are primarily comprised of small electrical components known as transistors, which look a bit like this. Now, picture 3,500 of these crammed into a chip the size of a quarter. Sound impressive? Well, believe it or not, the processor you just imagined is only as complex as the MOS 6507, contained in the Atari 2600 from 1977. The processor in my computer today has over 1.4 billion transistors on a chip of about the same size. Think about that for a second. A handful of these chips would contain more of these complex electrical components than there are humans on the Earth. In just 38 years, we've multiplied the complexity of these chips by over 400,000 times. And it shows. Look at how far our games have come. From very simple 2D shooters and platformers to massive, incredibly detailed game universes, packed with complex creatures and stunning environments. Worlds where you can do and experience anything you can imagine. The next time you're playing any of these modern games, look at your computer or console and imagine this for a second. That small box you're looking at is currently blasting hundreds of billions of electrons around at thousands of miles per hour, completing more calculations and tasks in a single second than the human brain can even fathom. And these circuits are still advancing, getting faster, more powerful, and even more complex. So how did we get to this point? It's hard to even imagine someone designing a chip this sophisticated. It would take multiple lifetimes to even count to 4 billion, let alone place 4 billion electrical components in such a specific way. Well, that's not really an easy question to answer, because as it turns out, it wasn't just one guy sitting in a basement placing transistor after transistor in a piece of silicon with some tweezers. Today's microprocessors are the result of hundreds of thousands of hours of work from thousands of brilliant men and women. Does that sound like too much to cover in this short of a video? That's because it is, but we're still going to try to summarize it in the best way we can. To make this easier, and because we're only really interested in the gaming side of things anyway, we'll mostly be focusing on home game consoles here. So let's get started. The first true home game console was the Magnavox Odyssey in 1972. Similar to something like a Pong machine, this unit didn't actually contain any sort of processors or even a single integrated circuit. Instead, it was primarily comprised of only about 40 full-size transistors and diodes. And this was an extremely complex machine for its time, so it wasn't until 1976 that its first true successor arrived. This console was the Channel F from Fairchild. Unlike the Odyssey, the Channel F actually did utilize an integrated CPU, known as the Fairchild F8. This microprocessor, with its whopping 64 bytes of integrated RAM and its 1 to 2 MHz clock speed, was revolutionary. It's hard to explain exactly why it was revolutionary without going very in-depth on the technical mumbo-jumbo, but essentially, it was known for packing a ton of components onto the chip. Before the F8, these components had to all be on the surrounding circuit board to actually have a complete processor. Because of this, the F8 was perfect for use in a game console, because it meant the hardware could stay relatively cheap and small, while retaining massive processing power. It may not sound like much, but it truly paved the way for microprocessors of the future. Similarly, Fairchild's Channel F console set the standard for all future consoles, and was truly one of the first steps towards the consoles we have today. The next huge innovation in the console hardware market came with the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was the first console to contain any sort of notable GPU, or Graphics Processing Unit. Originally called the Picture Processing Unit, or PPU, this chip was known as the RP2C02, from the Japanese tech company Ricoh, which, to this day, sells high-end video equipment. The NES contained 2 kilobytes of dedicated video RAM and was capable of manipulating 64 sprites and 25 colors on screen simultaneously. This was a huge step up from anything anyone had seen before, and it was all thanks to the console's very simple, dedicated GPU, which set the standard for all consoles to follow. Our next milestone once again comes from Nintendo, with the N64 being one of the first consoles intended to process complex 3D graphics. Some may argue that the PlayStation was the first console capable of true 3D. However, since we're looking for progression and influence here, we'll be focusing on the N64 simply because its GPU had more features, a lot of which can still be found on GPUs today. And even before the PlayStation, 3D graphics did exist. For example, Star Fox on the SNES had some pretty sexy 3D graphics, but these 3D games weren't actually rendered in 3D space. This is why I wouldn't call them true 3D. Instead, consoles before the N64 would mostly rely on pseudo-3D mechanisms. Consoles like the SNES still needed things like the Super FX chip, which was essentially a small coprocessor included on the cartridge to help the console with its 3D effects. The Nintendo 64's GPU was known as the Reality Coprocessor. This chip was one of the first truly influential steps towards the incredibly complex GPUs that we have today. It supported anti-aliasing, real-time depth buffering, and had upgradable, dedicated video memory. From here though, things went pretty quiet as far as huge technical advancements go. Newer consoles simply built on the performance and features of the PS1 and N64, all the way up to current day. Our latest 8th gen consoles still utilize many features laid out by the N64. We've just upgraded the speed, power, and complexity of these components by hundreds and thousands of times, and we're nowhere near slowing down. Moore's Law dictates that every 2 years, computer processing power will double, which, so far, has stayed true. And graphical advancements in games have kept up pretty well. Think about it, only 10 years ago, Battlefield 2 was considered one of the best looking games on the market. Compare that to a game like The Order 1886, and the difference is stunning. But things aren't even close to slowing down. How long until these quarter-sized chips are capable of rendering worlds just as detailed as reality, where each and every atom and molecule is being rendered? The company Euclidean has supposedly been developing an engine like this since 2012. They've released very little information, but if their demo videos are to be believed, we may be looking at the future of video games. The possible applications of this technology are incredible. Imagine the day when we can map out an entire, living, breathing human being for research on medicine, or an entire country, the entire planet, or even the entire universe in a one-to-one scale. What could this mean for science? And in return, us as a species? If Moore's Law stays true and we don't hit the boundaries of technology anytime soon, these things could be realities within the next 20 to 40 years. Partly thanks to us, the gaming community, and our endless quest for the most immersive and mind-blowing experiences possible. So what do you think about all this? Do you like where gaming technology is headed, and really technology as a whole? I remember one of my computer science teachers saying that if it wasn't for the gaming market, there wouldn't really be a use for graphical processors to keep advancing as rapidly as they are. Do you think that holds true? Let me know down below. So until next time, stay awesome, and never stop using that noggin.